Carlos Samaniego joins me here today, and you can learn what he does by going to taxdebtbook.com, taxdebtbook.com. And you can imagine we are going to be talking about the exciting world of taxes because it is that time of year, right?
It is.
You got to be getting close to busy.
Actually, you know what's crazy, Jack? I was just talking to somebody. They're like, this is your busy season. I go, well, technically, it is the busy season for the tax world. My busy season's like all year long because I have a really unique niche within the tax industry. All I do is literally fight the IRS when people have IRS tax problems or haven't filed their tax returns in years. So that's my specific niche, which keeps me busy year long. It never stops. Now, during this time frame, it starts to definitely pick up because people are going to file their tax returns like they're supposed to. And all of a sudden they're coming up with large balances they may owe, and they don't even know what to do with that balance. So then I start getting more calls. But yeah, it's definitely tax season, busy time.
Well, I'm going to guess that that's probably why you found your way onto the show, because when you say large amounts, I'd imagine a chunk of those people are real estate investors.
Quite a bit, quite a bit of people, real estate investors, people in the real estate industry end up sometimes getting these unexpected tax bills, especially when a sale of a property happens and they weren't expecting the tax ramifications of the sale of the property because they didn't do correct tax planning, whatever it might have been. But yeah, we get a lot of that. Or we get a lot of, especially real estate investors that end up finding out there's a tax lien on on a property maybe they wanted to purchase, or even their own property because they didn't realize a government agency popped the tax lien on it, which happens a lot. A lot of times they don't even realize that it happened for whatever reason. And yeah, there's tax liens on it. And now they're calling me. It's like, okay, what do I do now? How do we resolve this situation?
Sure. If you're working directly with the IRS in this place, you must have, I almost see it as a Chris Voss type scenario. You probably have learned some quite the negotiation tactics to deal with these people.
Yeah, actually, Chris Voss, I've actually sat down and had a couple of drinks with Chris Voss and told him what I did. He said the same thing. He's all, oh, you're doing a lot of negotiating with the IRS. And I said, that's exactly what we do. And one of the things that he taught is that, you know what, he teaches, you need to understand where they're coming from when you're dealing with these negotiations. And sometimes I tell people a lot of times that the reason I can deal with the IRS a lot more effectively than other people is because I technically don't have, it's not my money on the line, right? So I don't have the emotional aspect whereby when somebody calls the IRS directly and they took their money or they went after their bank accounts, they're emotionally invested. So sometimes the emotions can get really high on that phone call, whereby I'm coming in there, I understand how the rules work. They know that I understand how the rules work. So sometimes it's just much more easier for me to kind of have a good conversation with them, and the negotiations tend to go a little bit smoother.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit before we hit record, and you mentioned that there's kind of some turmoil going on right now with the IRS and some of the people that you're experiencing. What are you seeing and experiencing right now with the Doge and a few shakeups?
Oh, you know what, Jack, just in the last, just this last year, we've gone from two extremes. I mean, the one extreme was back when the previous administration, the IRS had gotten, $80 billion of funding for improvements and hiring of additional, not just IRS agents, but additional just staff. One of the things that we had noticed that, we work with the IRS on a regular basis is that a lot of the people that we would talk to the IRS, when we talked to the IRS, were a lot of older people. I mean, a lot of them were like, yeah, retirement's around the corner, going to be retiring in a few years. So we understood when the IRS was actually going through the process of hiring people, which, there's pros and cons of this. And one of the biggest complaints I get with consumers is I've been trying to get a hold of the IRS. I can't connect. I'm on hold for hours, or I've been trying to connect for days. That's a really common complaint when you're trying to deal with the IRS. Or I've sent in a letter trying to respond to something I haven't heard back in months, if not years. I just don't know what to do. So I want to hire somebody to deal with this. Well, part of that is just because they didn't have enough people really to kind of deal with it. They were getting millions of phone calls a day So we were kind of excited on our end is that, wow, they're going to get the funding to actually go hire people to pick up their dang phones and start kind of, they had almost a 3 to 4 year backlog. A lot of people don't realize during COVID, the IRS effectively shut down for almost 4 years. The 3.5, 4 years, they basically stopped all collections and a lot of mail, tax returns, refunds were just sitting in like in banker boxes. They were just sitting around in trailer houses, in storage basically, and nothing was being done. But last year, when basically the government went back to work, they started getting through the mail. People, they were actually starting to respond. So we were kind of getting excited about that. Well, now we can flash forward to the question that you asked. Well, it seems like there's been a lot of changes just with Doge and the, federal employees being let go. Well, we know for a fact 6,700 IRS employees were let go just this last couple of weeks. And 2,000 of those people were directly from the collection department. Those are the kind of people that we deal with on a regular basis. They're the ones that are picking up the phone, dealing with past due taxes, unfiled tax returns. So, and I said it earlier before we got on this, is that I literally had agents calling me, letting me know that my file that I was working with them on was being transferred because they were being let go. And, as much as none of us have liked the IRS, we can't stand the IRS, right? But they're also people. There is regular people with a job. So I was seeing the human emotional impact of it. I mean, literally crying, I don't know what to do. A couple of people was like, maybe you should start your own business helping people with tax problems. Just trying to kind of give them some hope. So, the cons there for us of the layoffs, there's less people. Again, going back to the reason why we wanted to hire people. Now there's just going to be less people to talk to. It's going to be harder to connect. It might get to the point where it's almost impossible to connect with the IRS. Fortunately for us, we have special phone numbers. The wait may not be days or weeks. We might just take hours to be able to connect to there. We think automated collections, the IRS using automation to collect on people, to do bank levies, we think it's going to increase much more and much faster. I just found out just recently, I had filed multiple appeals for individuals and the IRS never even processed their appeals. That becomes a challenge. And now we're trying to deal with that. So there's a lot going on and it's fast moving. It's literally changing by the day that we have to kind of stay on top of.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot there.
Yeah. So, with all that being said, it's unfortunate that people get into these situations. What are you seeing when it comes to business owners? Is it they're putting their heads in the sand before they come to you? What was the straw, if you will, that now they finally admit they need some help?
You know what, Jack? I don't know if you heard how I got into this business. I didn't wake up one day. It's not a childhood dream to go fight the IRS. Trust me. I was a young 20-year-old that got out of the military as a medic and decided to become an Army medic. I'm going to answer your question with this story. So I actually I just started a recent EMT paramedic job driving an ambulance locally. And as a 20-year-old, I ended up taking some really bad financial advice from the older guy. And the older guy was like 20, 21, 22 maybe. And he had told me, hey, instead of working so much overtime, why don't you just claim 10 exemptions on your paycheck and you'll get a bigger paycheck because they're not going to take as much taxes. So I took that financial advice. I did that. Guess what? He was 100% right. I ended up getting a big check because there weren't taxes being taken out. The problem was when it was time to file my tax returns, I had a big tax bill. So I did what nobody should do. I didn't file the return because I had a big tax bill. So I didn't file the return. And this is something I see very often, especially with entrepreneurs, investors, is that they may go file their tax bill and then realize, oh my gosh, there's a big tax bill here. I don't have the money to pay it. So maybe I'm just not going to file it, which is the worst possible thing you can actually. And the bad thing I did is I took financial advice from somebody that wasn't qualified to be giving me financial advice. And that's one thing I tell entrepreneurs and investors, make sure you're taking financial advice from people that understand what that advice entails and what's the pros and cons behind that advice. I see it a lot in the real estate industry. I see it in the car sales industry. And here's what I mean by that. I've seen real estate agents, and I do a lot of real estate talks throughout the country where, you have real estate agents giving their buyers or their sellers tax advice, and the tax advice is totally incorrect. The problem is that the tax world's a complicated world that's changing constantly. So you got to be careful who you're taking tax advice from. I even see it. We have a case right now. My son who works with me, he told me that he just had a case where somebody had bought a solar vehicle, a Tesla last year, and the individual gave them said that they were going to get all these tax benefits for buying the Tesla, only to realize the tax law changed last year, and those things aren't done on the tax return no more. The tax benefits actually go to the car dealership, and you're supposed to get your discount through the car deal. So again, just wrong tax advice from the wrong people. And
Mm.
that goes to the question is like, what do you see? It's just people, one, not filing returns because they're afraid that they have a balance and they can't pay, or two, they're just ignoring the balances that are currently have, or just accruing little balances. And the problem with accruing a bunch of little balances, those little balances become really big. And just like we all know power of compounding interest, how that grows. Well, it works with tax debt. When you have tax debt growing and interest and penalties compounding, it becomes a massive snowball that gets out of control. And that's kind of what happened in my situation. I went through, as I said earlier, I didn't file tax returns that first year. It wasn't until 8 years later where I hadn't filed returns for almost 8 years. And that was my 20s. I worked as a paramedic EMT and didn't file my tax returns for 8 years. And by the time I'm in my early 30s, I had realized what had happened. And I didn't even get it fixed until I met my future fiance and actually married her and still didn't tell her my tax problem. And then that's when I finally decided I have to fix my problem.
That's quite the story. When your fiance, did you finally break the news to her that you were having this issue?
Yeah, actually, she was my wife when I finally broke the news. And that's scumbag move number one. Never marry somebody when you have big financial problems or tax problems and not tell that person, because obviously when you become married, those become joint finances and you're literally giving them your problems. Fortunately for me, I realized what I did. I had already married her, and this was like maybe a couple of weeks into our marriage. I had decided I need to find somebody that can kind of tell me what to do with this tax roll because I didn't know what to do. I talked about it in my book. It's the secret that nobody talks about. When you don't file your taxes or you owe large balances, it's not like Sunday dinner conversation or Thanksgiving conversation. A lot of times, family members or even spouses don't even know about tax problems that exist. Same with me. I didn't know what to do. And I started doing my own research and I found out that there are actually 3 people in the country that are allowed to represent somebody in front of the IRS. They're attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents. Enrolled agents is a license issued by the Department of Treasury that legally enables you to represent somebody for taxes. So I had actually found a guy. His name was Ernie. He was a local guy. I remember sitting down with him, calling him up on Christmas Eve. He actually told me to come into his office, told him my situation. He goes, "You're not a bad person. You made a bad mistake, stupid mistake, and I'm going to fix it." After I had that conversation with him, that's when I went back to my wife and said, "Hey, I had told myself, if I'm going to tell her, I better at least have a solution to this." And I sat down with her, told her I had something I had to tell her. She was pissed. She screamed at me. She didn't leave me, but she asked me, "What's your plan?" And luckily for me, I said I had Ernie that was going to help me fix this problem, and which he did. Fortunately for me, my problems ended up getting fixed over time. We came up with a game plan. And Ernie had kind of whispered in my ear, "Hey, if you ever decide to make a career change in your life, now I'm in my mid 30s. I think you'd be really good at this type of work." Quite a few years went by. I was looking for a career change. And my wife had actually was the one that brought it up to me. Hey, this was pretty much after 2008. I was a real estate agent and a mortgage lender back then. The 2008 debacle happened. So I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And my wife had brought it up. "Hey, why don't you do what Ernie had mentioned, help people with tax problems?" And luckily for me, she's actually the co-founder of our company, Tax Debt Consultants. We both solve people's tax problems.
Well, it's everybody kind of has their story and their path. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a purpose to this whole thing. I mean, you found your way here. I just want to call this out one more time here. Head over to taxdebtbook.com, taxdebtbook.com to learn more and take advantage of what he's offering there.
Free book here.
What's the name of that? The print is, I see the words tax in big print, but what does it
It's
say on?
how to make the IRS an offer they can't refuse.
Well, we were talking about the negotiation aspect
Yeah.
of this. Carlos, I think you mentioned you avoided this for a number of years.
Yeah.
A lot of people are thinking that, man, this is insurmountable. Like, what type of negotiation is available to people? Like,
Yeah.
what do they not know?
Well, a couple of things there you just brought up. I had went years, and the thing is that the government sometimes takes years to catch up. And something very unique happened. We talked about earlier COVID, right? The IRS did not collect from anybody for almost 4 years. Didn't send out letters, didn't send out reminders for 4 years. So a lot of people that may have owed money or maybe they didn't file their returns haven't heard nothing. And then all of a sudden, which literally in the last 6 months, everybody's like getting these notices from the IRS out of the blue. And a lot of times they're like, wait a second, I thought they forgot about me. They didn't forget about you. They just didn't have the ability to really kind of come after you or to at least notify you that you owed money. So all they really did is just turn on their computer system. Now they're getting these notices that are coming nonstop. I just got a stack of them a few minutes ago from our secretary. You're getting these collection notices, these liens or levy notices. Now the question is, well, what do you do when you're in that type of situation? Are there any options to negotiate with the IRS? And the answer is, Jack, there's 4 broad options when it comes down to when you owe the IRS. Option number 1 is probably the simplest to understand is an installment agreement. You have the ability to pay. You have an ability to pay them to get into some type of installment agreement with the IRS. Now, the question is whether it's an affordable installment agreement because the IRS might have what they believe is affordable, and then you might have what you believe you can actually afford. And a lot of times those don't match up. So a lot of times when you call the IRS and they're like, okay, we want $2,500 a month, you're like, I can't pay that. I can barely afford $100 a month to do anything. That's where we get involved. It's like, now we need to go talk to the IRS and like, hey, let's talk about this and why you're coming up with your number and what we believe. So that there's a negotiation part there. There's another thing called a currently not collectible, which is a powerful tool a lot of people don't realize. That's when the IRS looks at your situation and says, hey, based on the income that you're earning, based on the expenses that you have, what we call the allowable expenses. One thing the IRS is very good at is that they want to make sure you can pay your rent, your mortgage, your utilities. They want to make sure you can feed your family, you have gas for your car. So there's a lot of what they call allowable expenses. They're going to allow you. If they look at those allowable expenses and look at your income and then look at what they would need to pay their bill off, you might be what's called a currently not collectible. And that's when the IRS just says, you know what, there's no way you can pay us. So we're just going to turn off collections for you right now because you don't have that ability to pay. That is an option the IRS has. And when you have that option, they basically stop all collections. Now, the negative part about that is the interest and penalties continue to rise. They just can't collect on it. The other option is kind of what you hear on the radio all the time, settle for pennies on the dollar with the IRS. That is a legitimate option. It's called an offer and compromise. The radio stations will call it the Fresh Start program. Well, there's nothing fresh about this. This program has been around since the early 2000s. They just like using it like it's a brand new program. That is available. I've had quite a few clients that qualify for an offer and compromise. The challenge with that is, though, it's very tightly regulated and they really do a deep dive on your finances. They're looking at, again, your income and your expenses. How much money do you have left over? They're looking at your assets. They're looking at, do you have equity in a home? Do you have money in a bank account? 401k? They're looking at all that stuff. The one important thing to understand, especially for your listeners, if they're in that situation where they owe money, is the IRS is warning people about this. There is a lot of scam artists that are trying to, they're literally telling everybody that they qualify for this program and you don't. And what they'll do is they'll convince you, it'll be a salesperson convincing you why you qualify for this. They'll take your $5,000 or $10,000. They're going to charge you up front. They will submit the paperwork only for you to find out months, if not a year down the road, that you never even qualified in the first place. Guess what they do? By the time you contact them, they're gone. They've shut down. They've opened up another place under a different name, and they're doing the same thing again. I tell people, if you believe that that's a possibility, talk to a person like me or somebody that understands this. I can tell people usually within a 5 to 10 minute conversation if there's even a possibility of to look at that. And for me, a lot of times it's just I'm looking at home equity. Think about it, Jack. You know, if you owe the government $50,000, but you're sitting on $500,000 of home equity, they are not going to negotiate that debt because they're just going to put a lien on the property and they'll get paid in the future. They just look at it that way. So that's how I can pretty much, when I'm talking to somebody, I can just run some quick numbers. How much equity do you have in your property? Do you have any money in saving 401k? How much money do you owe? And if those numbers are all negative and they have a lot, you may qualify. Now we have to deep in the weeds to find it. So those are the four main ones: installment agreement, currently not collectible, offer and compromise. And there's another unknown one a lot of people don't know about. It's called a partial pay installment agreement. That's where the IRS says, hey, you don't qualify for an offer and compromise. You don't qualify for a currently not collectible, but you really can't pay the full amount of what you owe. So we're going to ask for a partial pay monthly payment. We'll do that for a certain amount of years. And if you do that, we will cancel the rest of the tax debt. That is an option that IRS does not advertise.
Well, with all of that, it'd be good to hear something in practice. Could you share a story of somebody that you might have been able to help regarding
Yeah.
some of these negotiations? And
Let me give you a real estate broker. I had a real estate broker, and she came to me, pretty large tax debt, close to 500,000 over the years. And, you know, a lot of people in the real estate industry were making some really good commissions over the last 10 years. I mean, real estate market's been really good. And a lot of them just didn't pay their estimated payments. So tax bills started kind of getting out of control. She came to us. IRS literally, she had tried to talk to them and negotiate with them. IRS wanted close to a $7,000 a month payment. That's what they wanted. I went through her situation and was going through, again, we're doing a deep dive into her financials, and she did have equity. She was a homeowner. So I already could take the offer and compromise was going to be off the table. It's just, there was a lot of equity still sitting in the property. So we can't even look at that option, and we know she couldn't qualify for that full payment the IRS wanted. They wanted that full payment. So by the time I went through her deep dive into her financials, I had realized that she had about $350 a month available to her. That was it. Where the IRS. And I had told her, because typically the IRS, when you got that much debt and then quite a bit of equity, the IRS is now typically asking you to attempt to refinance your property to pay off your debt. So I had told her that might be a possibility going into this negotiation. I went into the negotiation, presented her information. IRS just came back and said, if you can make $350 a month payment, we will take that. And they mentioned nothing about refinancing. But here was the great news. Over the next couple of years, there was a good portion of that tax debt would expire, because tax debt does expire. And when you enter into an installment agreement or even a partial pay installment agreement, tax debt can expire as time goes on. So with her, I think we're going to have almost $100,000 of tax debt disappear as she's making these $300 monthly payments. So that was a perfect example of, you know what, had she had dealt with that negotiation with the IRS with that $7,000 a month that they wanted, it was just no way it was going to happen. And we happened to get something that was extremely reasonable for her and be able to move forward and move on with her life and not have to deal with this to the IRS. And that's just one.
people are possibly getting these notifications from the IRS. Are there things that they should avoid doing? Like, should they be contacting somebody like you before they contact the IRS, or what directly? Like, what should they do if they're swimming in this right now?
Yeah, I'll literally say that the biggest thing is to open up the letters. You want to open up your letters with the IRS. a lot of people go through that process of not opening up their letters. Open up the letter, because there's critical dates on those letters that give you certain rights to appeal, to get in negotiations with the IRS. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, if you get a letter that's certified mail, it's critically important that you open it up, because there are specific timelines. You'll get two letters. The most typical IRS letters is a CP 504 letter, and it literally will say final notice of levy. I call that CP 504 letter, when you get it, I call it the barking dog behind the gate. It's mean, it's nasty. I got a big German Shepherd, right? They're mean, they're nasty, they bark, but they can't bite you. That's that typically that first certified letter. The second certified letter is the letter 11. That basically is the gate has opened and that dog can come out and bite you at any time. And what I mean by bite you, that means, going after the bank account and draining the bank account. That's literally, if you're a wage earner, you get a paycheck, they can do a 25% deduction. And if you're self-employed, they can take 100% of your self-employment income, 1099 income. So that's the big things that you want to be aware of when these letters come out. And they're going to come out much faster now because of the automated stuff. So you just want to pay attention to what letters are showing up, and making sure you respond or contacts. Once you get those two certified letters, and if you haven't dealt with it up until that point, you need to call a tax professional to deal with that, because there's emergency procedures that can stop them from doing any further damage to your life.
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of people just kind of try to ignore it the best they can and hope that it's just going to go away.
Exactly.
So, Carlos, this is a great conversation. I just want to make sure everybody knows of your book again, taxdebtbook.com, taxdebtbook.com. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode, is there a topic we should have tried to hit on?
No, I mean, you covered it all there. The most important thing, guys, is, again, as I mentioned, if you get those notices, you got to respond. It's not like the IRS has been for the last 4 years, where they haven't done nothing. They're doing stuff now. They are actually going after people. So just open those letters.
Yeah. And I'm guessing they're trying to make sure that they place value on their position right now. So they might even be a little more aggressive. So taxdebtbook.com, that's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. But if you're ready, Carlos, we'll jump into the rapid fire.
Sure.
So first off, what lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
That they can do it all themselves. And that's just a common lie. Even when I was in the real estate industry, I didn't realize how many people are needed. Everything from your real estate agent to your lender to your escrow officer to your title officer to your tax person, to giving you the tax ramifications of a buy or sell situation. So you can't do nothing yourself.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Everything eventually works itself out. Life is just a bunch of ups and downs, and your job is to keep cool through the calm, and even on the highs, you want to be along that medium. Just get through life and don't take anything too seriously.
When you said that you waited as many years as you did regarding dealing with your tax problem, was it as bad as you imagined it would be?
I kicked myself in the head why I waited so long. It's just, once I actually dealt with it, it was so much easier to deal with it. And I hear this a lot when people go bankrupt. A lot of times people will go bankrupt. They need to go bankrupt and they wait years and years. And then when they finally do it, they're like, I wish I would have did this so much longer ago. I wouldn't have stressed out about it. Same thing with this. So it was not as bad as I thought it was. Well, when you know what the game plan is, you have someone like myself giving you the game plan of getting out, you see the light at the end of the tunnel pretty quick.
Do you have a book recommendation?
The book, The One Thing, I think it's Gary Keller. The One Thing was life-changing because, sometimes we concentrate on so many different things. It's just, you got to do that one thing every day. That one thing that's going to make a change in your business. For me, every morning, I do one marketing piece every single day. Doesn't get overwhelming. I know that I'm doing one thing every day to build my business. I think it's a great book.
And lastly, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you in your business?
Time saving impact. Believe it or not, I learned something about a year ago. Transcendental meditation. It's for me was a game changer on dealing with just life stress and giving me more time in my life. Believe it or not, it's just taking 20 minutes a day, sit down, quiet my mind. When you're dealing with the high stress world and what I deal with, the high anxiety of tax problems and the IRS, that was a game changer for me.
No, I can imagine you probably have heard quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Well, one more time, taxdebtbook.com. Take advantage of the opportunity there, taxdebtbook.com. Really appreciate your time, Carlos. This was a great conversation. There was a lot of value here.
Thank you so much for having me.